Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a seriously fascinating journey, moving away from traditional, deeply rooted dogma and stepping into a modern, incredibly empowering psychological framework. We're unpacking a really comprehensive document known as the Moe Khak Nwel Doctrine. And let me tell you, this isn't just some abstract philosophical concept. It's a 21st century mindset, an ethical boundary system, and a highly practical psychological training toolkit, all rolled into one. Let's get started.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Picture this super familiar scenario. A student doesn't study, totally bums an exam, and immediately says, well, my astrological signs are just bad right now. Or, maybe you've even blamed the alignment of Jupiter for sleeping through your alarm, right? Or think about a much larger scale, when a severe drought or an earthquake strikes, and the immediate gut reaction for so many is to say, the spirits are angry. So why do we do this? Well, because outsourcing our failures to the stars is just way easier than taking accountability. But here's the catch. By surrendering to the supernatural, we are completely surrendering our own agency. And this brings us straight to the doctrine's foundational pillar, scientific epistemology. Now, the traditional view relies heavily on blind faith, blaming supernatural forces or past karma for whatever suffering is happening right now. But the Moe Khak Nwel view, it flips this entirely on its head. It asserts that the universe operates on natural laws, totally free of any personal bias. Honestly, the universe doesn't have it out for you. A drought isn't some kind of divine punishment, it's climate change, which means the solution isn't a prayer ritual, it's scientific resource management. It absolutely demands evidence-based logic over blind faith. So here's our quick roadmap for today. First, philosophical foundation. Second, dismantling fear. Third, the harm principle. Fourth, practical mind training. And fifth, authoring your life. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you're going to have a highly practical mental toolkit. Let's kick things off with Section 1, Philosophical and Responsibility Foundation. So the name Moe Khak Nwel is actually this beautiful metaphor for an elevated intelligence, kind of like vines intertwining together to overcome a massive, difficult hurdle, totally free from any cult of personality. And right at the very heart of this intelligence is the concept of ata thi atano natho, which translates to you are your own master. This is all about taking 100% psychological ownership of your state of mind. But wait, here is a really vital distinction. This is absolutely not about victim blaming. If you're facing systemic injustice, taking personal responsibility doesn't mean saying, oh, this is my fault. Not at all. It means actively participating in collective, intelligent action to change that oppressive system yourself. You don't just sit around and wait for a supernatural savior to fix it. Moving right along to Section 2, dismantling fear. So the crucial point here is that to truly be your own master, we have to deconstruct what holds us back the most. Why do we lie awake at night filled with dread, wondering if bad karma is going to strike us down just for breaking some arbitrary traditional rule? Well, the source text deconstructs this brilliantly. That panic, it's really just a combination of two things. First, evolutionary biology. That sudden spike of fear is literally just your amygdala, your brain's ancient reptilian alarm system, triggering a basic fight or flight response. And second, it's social conditioning. Society and institutions have hammered concepts like sen into your subconscious for years just to control behavior. These aren't divine truths, guys. They are psychological shackles. Let's break this down a bit further. When the traditional mind is terrified of hell or some supernatural punishment, the scientific mind steps back and recognizes it simply as guilt conditioning implanted by their environment. When the traditional mind fears karma, the scientific mind sees objective biological and physical cause and effect. And perhaps most profoundly, when the traditional mind feels crushed by existential meaninglessness, the doctrine reframes it entirely. It shifts that dread of meaninglessness into the ultimate freedom. The freedom of self-authored meaning. All right, on to Section 3, the 4 types of harm. Now, once you finally strip away all those arbitrary religious rules, how do you actually know what's right and wrong? Well, the doctrine replaces subjective dogma with 4 dimensions of objective harm. 1, physical harm, which is violence or restricting someone's bodily autonomy. 2, mental harm, like systematic bullying or intentionally inducing trauma. 3, intellectual harm, which means systematically spreading misinformation or denying people access to facts. And 4, systemic harm,
A perfect example of this last one is a company paying minorities less despite equal qualifications. That systematically blocks a specific group's rights. Basically, any action causing these four harms is ethically wrong. Simple as that. And this brilliantly illustrates one of the most vital modern distinctions we need to make today, the difference between mere offense and actual mental harm. Imagine an author writes a book logically criticizing a traditional belief, and followers demand the book be burned just because they feel offended. The Doctrine uses a strict 3D standard to evaluate this: duration, disruption, and direct target. You see, offense is just a temporary emotional reaction to an idea. Mental harm, on the other hand, involves a power imbalance where a direct target is actively bullied, resulting in long-term trauma that actually disrupts their daily life. The Doctrine fiercely protects the right to critique ideas, but strictly prohibits actual objective harm. Let's transition into Section 4, Practical Mind Training.
Let's move to the actual tools and see how this all builds together. Now that we have a solid ethical foundation, how do we actually apply this every single day? This mind audit flowchart is basically your new core operating system for navigating daily stressors without having to rely on supernatural hope or collapsing under the weight of anxiety. The logic here is brilliantly simple. Step 1. Ask yourself, can I control this situation? If the answer is no, like, say, the weather or someone else's random opinion of you, you categorize it as external and you just accept it peacefully. If the answer is yes, you move straight to step 2. Does my intended action cause harm? Using those 4 dimensions we just went over. If yes, you must change your action. If no, you proceed with absolute confidence, acting strictly on the facts. This flowchart is supported by 5 really specific modules. Module 1 is cognitive bias auditing. When you see something triggering online, you don't just react immediately, you pause for 3 seconds. You ask yourself, do I actually believe this because it's true or just because it validates my bias? Module 2 is the social unconditioning protocol. When you feel guilty for breaking an arbitrary tradition, you trace that guilt back to its root source. If you haven't caused any objective harm, you actively instruct your brain to drop the guilt. Just let it go. Module 3 is where biology really meets psychology, emotional reframing. When you are absolutely furious, your amygdala has basically hijacked you. The first step is biological labeling, literally telling yourself, okay, this isn't a supernatural attack, it's just cortisol and adrenaline flooding my system. Then you use physical tools to hack your nervous system. The physiological sigh, which is 2 quick inhales through the nose, followed by a long exhale through the mouth, rapidly slows your heart rate. Or you can use the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique, naming things you can see and touch right around you to pull your anxious mind violently back into the present physical reality. Wrapping up the toolkit, Module 4 asks you to run that 4-dimension harm check before making any major life decision, just to be sure. And finally, Module 5 is the locus of control internalization. This one is huge. It demands that you stop wasting your energy on the external circle, the global economy, the past, the weather, things you can't touch. Instead, you focus 100% of your psychological energy solely on the internal circle, your reactions, your own skill building, and your collective systemic actions. Focus only on what you can actually change. And that brings us to our final section, Part 5, Authoring Your Own Life. When you fully internalize this doctrine, a really profound shift happens. Many people look up at the vastness of the universe. They realize there is no grand cosmic script written just for them, and they feel this crushing existential dread. They feel tiny. But the Moe Khak Nwel doctrine reframes this beautifully. The absence of a pre-written destiny isn't a tragedy at all. It is literally the ultimate liberation. It means you hold the pen. You are the author of your own life's meaning. By applying logic, rejecting fear, ensuring you cause no objective harm, and truly mastering your own mind, you're entirely free to build your own purpose. So I'll leave you with this final question. Now that the psychological shackles are finally off, what kind of life are you going to write?